Eddie Howe just delivered Newcastle United Champions League football for a second time after not getting any first-team signings in the door the last 3 windows, including the January of the season, last summer, and the January before. He won their first domestic trophy in 70 years. Ended the trophy drought, Champions League football, money coming in, Champions League pool, and he has just been given nothing. We've got to talk about it. I mean, what's going on with Paul Mitchell? What's going on with the sporting director? Paul Mitchell is gone. Eddie Howe, Newcastle, this transfer window so far has been a disgrace. Now, look, there is a lot of competition. Joao Pedro, they went for him. He went to Chelsea. Delap, Man United and Newcastle both got rejected by Delap. He went to Chelsea. James Trafford, they could have signed him before the Club World Cup. They didn't pay up. City decided they wanted him. They had the advantage. Matheus Cunha, he is a lifelong obsessed Manchester United fan. Ekitike, 2 weeks ago, we were in a position where it looked like Newcastle were going to keep Isak and sign Ekitike. It looked like Newcastle were going to cook something good. They just signed Elanga. They were in for Ekitike. Isak was set to stay. I was like, Newcastle might be cooking something here. They clearly have money. We're going to talk about Sesko and talk about Vissa. We're going to talk about potential centre-backs coming in and all of that. They also need a midfielder. And then obviously the whole Mbeumo situation, which took 7 weeks. So painful, which Man United did, yeah, overpay for a little bit, but good player. So already it's not been a great start to the window by Newcastle. Elanga's a good addition, but they've missed out on so many targets. And you just got to look at Eddie Howe and go, that guy deserves better. You got to look at this. I don't even know what to say. What was the point of bringing Paul Mitchell in? I don't know. We'll talk about that later. But Newcastle, 2 weeks ago, it looked like they were cooking something. It looked like we were going to get Ekitike. It looked like Isak was going to stay. And I always believed Alexander Isak was going to stay at Newcastle. I always believed that. I said, Isak's not pushing for the move. They don't want to sell him. Isak will stay. And when Liverpool went in for Ekitike, I was like, okay, that's confirmation they're not getting Isak. Like, I was like, very much, despite the media news and reporting on it, I've always said, well, if Isak's not pushing for the move, he won't go, blah, 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 blah. Just a couple of days ago, it's announced, all of a sudden, Isak, he wants to leave. He's left the tour, dropped from the Celtic squad. But why has he done that after they've signed Ekitike? Why didn't he wait? Why didn't he do that a couple of weeks earlier? Then they get Isak. Newcastle get Ekitike. No. I mean, talk about timing. Isak, do you know what it is? Isak saw a lack of ambition and he got fed up and he wanted to leave. I think Isak was happy to stay. Champions League football, Eddie Howe fought Newcastle back on track. I think he was happy to stay. There was Elanga, there was talk of Joao Pedro, there was talk of Ekitike, someone coming in. I thought he was happy to stay. Then I think Ekitike going to Liverpool. I think that was the final straw for Isak, and he went, this club isn't showing ambition. Because we looked at Newcastle, and I thought Champions League football, won a trophy. They haven't won a first-team signing in the last 3 windows before this, so there's money for them to spend. And it's just L after L after L after L. You know, and of course, look, they can't compete with the wages that some of the big clubs give players. It gives them a disadvantage because if Newcastle give a club crazy wages and then Newcastle don't get Champions League football next season, then they get in PSR issues. While other clubs, because they generate more than Newcastle, they could give out crazy wages, not get Champions League football, and it doesn't hit them as much. So, of course, there's just natural disadvantages there where the system doesn't necessarily benefit Newcastle. But I'm just like, it's just going worse. It's not just the rejection. It's not just the Paul Mitchell, what is going on with your sporting director? Isak now wants to leave, your best player. And he's done it at like the worst timing possible. And I go back to it and I just look at Eddie Howe. And the guy deserves so much better, man. I feel like the fans of Newcastle deserve better than this. Eddie Howe deserves better than this. What is going on? Like, seriously. I feel like Eddie Howe has been lied to. I feel like he must be very unhappy. He's a nice guy. And I got stick for this because I'm a Man United fan. I got stick for this for saying I feel sorry for Eddie Howe. Apparently, no Man United fan should feel sorry for Eddie Howe. Like, this guy took over Bournemouth when they were League 2. Liquidation. Like, Bournemouth were done in when Eddie Howe took them over. I think he actually brought training stuff out of his own pocket. They didn't even have enough team players for a squad. They were going into the reserves. You know, he took Bournemouth from that state to Premier League, kept them in the Premier League, went over to Newcastle, got them Champions League football, then had an injury crisis second season, dropped off, then got them Champions League football again, and won their first domestic trophy in 70 years. And now his best player wants to leave. He hasn't got any of his targets in other than Elanga. It's L after L after L. Champions League football, Champions League money. Didn't get anything last summer. Unless you're Sule, Lloyd Kelly, you're not counting him. He did. It's like Liverpool signing Chiesa last summer. It doesn't count. This guy deserves better. He deserves so much better. Apparently, I'm not allowed to say that as a Man United fan. Apparently, some guy on Twitter and a couple of Man United fans on Twitter give me stick for saying Eddie Howe deserves better. I feel for him. How can you not feel for him? He is one of those managers that is. I will always have the most respect for Eddie Howe, because the way he's worked up from the bottom, nothing was handed on the plate for him. Nothing's been easy. Even last season, Newcastle getting Champions League last season was an incredible achievement. An absolutely incredible achievement with what they got. And people say all the money they spent in the past, blah, 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 blah. No, but like, what Newcastle done the last 3 windows under Eddie Howe? Zilch, Champions League football, trophy, and Newcastle's win in the Carabao Cup. They knocked out all the best teams in the Carabao Cup to get there. You know, and he deserves a lot more respect for that, Eddie Howe. I think he's a fantastic manager. I don't know what's gone on with Paul Mitchell. I thought he would be a good appointment. Clearly not. Clearly, probably the worst appointment. This whole Dan Ashworth, Paul Mitchell situation. This video is very raw, by the way. I haven't actually planned what I was going to say. I've just gone on the flow. I feel like Dan Ashworth leaving Newcastle was bad for Newcastle, because obviously when he left and went to Man United, there was a load of PR pieces to come out and try and make out Dan Ashworth was bad. But him and Eddie Howe, they had some good connection. They had some good things going. And after Dan Ashworth left, you had the summer where just nothing happened. And you've had this summer, which has been awful. Paul Mitchell's come in, stopped Isak being given a new contract, not really done anything. He's gone. I don't know what's gone there. Clearly, he wasn't getting on with Eddie Howe. And of course, as I said, you've got to back Eddie Howe and Paul Mitchell. Man United brought in Ashworth to sack him 5 months later, which is a disgraceful decision. I'm saying this now as a Man United fan. Jim Ratcliffe is an idiot for getting rid of Ashworth. Do you know why Ashworth went? I got behind-the-scenes info on this. Man United tried to put out PR pieces that Ashworth wanted Southgate. That wasn't the case. Ashworth was concerned about sacking Ten Hag and replacing him with Amorim, because he said Amorim plays such a different style to Ten Hag, so he needs so many new players in to make it work, and we don't have the money to do that. And Man United were like, doesn't matter, get rid of Ten Hag, get Amorim in. Oh my God, we got worse. And Dan Ashworth was basically the guy saying, are you sure Amorim's the approach? So he got sacked for that. I mean, did Newcastle bring back Dan Ashworth? Probably not. But I don't know what's going on with the sporting director there. You know what? You're going to have to tell me in the comments. Are you bringing in a sporting director? Like, that was a disgrace. So yeah, Newcastle went in for Ekitike. It looked like we were going to keep Isak and get Ekitike. And it looked like Newcastle were good. Like Elanga, Ekitike, Isak, Murphy, Gordon. What a front line. Like, how much emotions can change in 2 weeks? I honestly believe Newcastle were going to keep Isak, because Isak was never pushing for the move until the other day. I thought they were going to get James Trafford in. That didn't happen. He's gone to Manchester City. They could have got him in. They faffed. That's their own fault. Again, I think Burnley were overpricing it, and I get you don't want to be held to ransom, but you know what I mean. But now Alexander Isak wants to leave Newcastle. So it's not just Ekitike. You then go back. Joao Pedro, Delap, Cunha, and Mbeumo, all of the links. I mean, even Mark Guehi, although he hasn't moved to Liverpool yet, maybe he could. That'd be a good response. You still need that striker, Mark Guehi. And I also look and say, if you do sell Isak, try and go for Harvey Elliott, because you're building such a transitional base side that if you're going to come up against low blocks, you might struggle. Go for Harvey Elliott. But Isak wants to go. Isak probably couldn't have picked a worse time. I think Isak was happy to stay, got fed up, saw a lack of ambition, thought Newcastle were going to build something, decided he wants Liverpool. I honestly think that's the case. If you disagree with me, let me know. But Isak is a target for Liverpool. It might happen. Now, I'm going to be honest. I've seen Man United fans bantering Newcastle. Newcastle fans in the mud, lol. Why are we bantering Newcastle? Why? I love a bit of football banter. Gave out one today about Victor Gyökeres retiring for winning trophies. Rattled the Arsenal fan base. It's a bit of fun. But would you rather, like Man United fans, if you're watching, would you rather Isak be at Liverpool or Newcastle? Because we could say, oh, but, you know, Newcastle in that race for 5th, Villa in that race for 5th, they haven't done anything, blah, 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 blah. We're there's a 90% chance we're in a race for 10th, not a race for 5th next season. Like, we should be looking at what Wolves, West Ham, Crystal Palace, Sunderland, Leeds are doing. Not worrying about Newcastle too much. So I don't know why we're bantering Newcastle about it. Because I'm sitting here like, I don't want Newcastle to lose Isak. Yes, Newcastle are better than us. Yes, Newcastle is more competition. I don't want them to strengthen too much because I want to finish above Newcastle. But Liverpool won the league. If they win the Premier League this coming season, that's 21 titles. That means they beat Manchester United. That's a disgrace. They've signed Ekitike, they've signed Rice. I do not want Isak at Liverpool because we all know how good Isak is. He's injury prone, that's the only thing that lets him down, but we all know how good he is. So, people are bantering Newcastle, people are laughing at Newcastle. If you're not a Liverpool fan, don't laugh at Newcastle. Arsenal fans, why are you laughing at Newcastle losing Isak? Because you ain't going to win the league if Liverpool get Isak, and you just want to win the league, but you keep coming second. I don't know why everyone is laughing at Newcastle for losing Isak. If you're a Liverpool fan, yes, but you haven't got him yet, and he could still stay. He could still stay just because he's pushing for a move. Just because Newcastle look like maybe there's a price on it now. Isak could still stay because it's a costly deal. He could still stay. This could be a Isak plan to get a new contract. So I don't get the laughing at it yet. But I do think Isak could go, and this is why. Newcastle United are exploring a move for Benjamin Sesko of RB Leipzig in the case Alexander Isak leaves. The 22-year-old forward subject to long-standing Newcastle interest, top target should Isak depart, blah, blah, blah. First of all, having watched the Bundesliga, Ekitike is a better player than Sesko. I'll tell you that now. Sesko is a better finisher and he's better in the air. But as an all-round player, Ekitike is better. Sesko's one of those. If you give Sesko service, he will be good. If you give Sesko good crosses, he will be good. Sesko is very raw, so is Ekitike. He's very raw, but Sesko could be the next Zlatan Ibrahimovic or the next Rasmus Højlund. He's better than Højlund. He probably won't be that bad. He's a risk for Newcastle, but Sesko would be a good move for Newcastle. Don't get me wrong. Sesko reminds me a little bit of Zlatan. He's monstrous. He's fast. He's unbelievable in the air. Sesko would be a very good signing for Newcastle. It's definitely a risk. But you lose Isak, you get Sesko. It's not a bad deal, particularly if you bring in Visser on top of Sesko, because obviously, as David Ornstein mentioned, you're looking at Visser. I think if Newcastle replaced Isak with Visser and Sesko, they got Harvey Elliott and a deal for Isak. That's very good additions to their sort of attacking midfield front line. And then they need to go and get that centre back and that goalkeeper. Lemen's 14 million. I don't know if he's going to go to Man United because I think United don't really want a striker before a goalkeeper. We got no money. He's been linked to Man United. But if I'm Newcastle, Wissa, Sesko, try and get Harvey Elliott in a deal if you're selling Isak. I think he'd be good for breaking down low blocks. Then go and get a good centre-back. Scavini been linked to. If you could get Mark Guehi, go for him. Then, do you know, if I'm Liverpool, if I'm Newcastle, I go for Mark Guehi. I do everything I can to get Mark Guehi to stick your fingers up at Liverpool. Stick your fingers up at Liverpool for being knobheads. Stick them up. Go all out for Mark Guehi. If you can't get him, Scavini, whoever you're looking at. But then I do look at them. You've got Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes, and Joelinton. 3 unbelievable midfielders. One gets injured, you drop off a lot. That's something that needs to be considered with Champions League football. Joelinton can be quite injury prone because Newcastle, when they were last in the Champions League, got a couple of injuries. They dropped off a bit. So I do look at Newcastle and I go, this is good. This would be a good move. Apparently, it's closer and closer. Tottenham have interest, Villa have interest. Apparently, he wants Newcastle. Ben Jacobs said that Newcastle United are working on personal terms with Sesko. He's working on personal terms with Sesko. Newcastle already present their project to Benjamin Sesko. They want to go big, said Romano. Newcastle were keen on Sesko. So I think the fact that Newcastle were sort of making that move for Sesko suggests that I think Isak's going to go. And I never thought Isak was going to go. The media, because the media has that big 6 bias, they've been putting out Isak is going all summer. Because the media has that big 6 bias, it was Arsenal back in January to about May time, and it's been Liverpool the last few months. But I've always sort of tried to ignore the big 6 bias and use sense. If Isak isn't pushing to leave and Newcastle don't want to sell him, then Isak isn't going anywhere unless Liverpool put out a load of money. Now Isak is pushing to leave and Newcastle have got alternatives. It's a different case. Obviously, you need a Callum Wilson replacement, but Visser and Sesko, that's a suggestion. But it's interesting because I feel like Newcastle are in such a position to do something good, and it's not been good. Now, Eddie Howe is known to be an overachiever. I think Eddie Howe will I still think Newcastle, he's going to do something. Unless there's injuries because of the lack of depth, I think he'll still do something like Lewis Hall, Livramento, great fullback pairing. Like Dan Burn, Botman, and Shaw, all good centre backs. Fitness on Botman is a big thing. You know how good their midfield three is, but can they stay fit a full season with European football? Harvey Barnes and Gordon on the left, that's fine. Murphy and Lang on the right, that's fine. If you get Sesko, you get Visser. I think Harvey Elliott, because you're building such a transition-based team, you need someone to break down low blocks. And also, he could play instead of Joel Linton, and then you could play Bruno Guimaraes and Tonali deeper in the midfield too. So it could be midfield depth. I think if you could get that, you get a centre-back, go try for Mark Guehi again, but I don't think you'll get him, and then Oscar Vinny, and then maybe a goalkeeper that's good at playing out. I think the Newcastle are in a better position. But this next month is huge for Newcastle because you've taken a lot of L's. And I'm not laughing at it like other rivals. You know, I'm not laughing at it because I'm like, I don't want Isak to go to Liverpool. So I'm not laughing at it. Anyway, it hasn't happened yet, but it's not been a good window. On top of, I don't know what's going on with the sporting director, but Eddie Howe deserves better. And I feel like he's been lied to. I feel like maybe Isak was lied to. Maybe Newcastle fans just been lied to. Going for all these players, this promising project, and so far nothing. It's obviously difficult because there's a lot of competition in the Premier League. You can't pay the exact same wages you have, even though you've sold. Just be more careful with PSR. But it's concerning. It's concerning.